There was a man named Chijiok who had everything anyone could dream of. He was rich, handsome, and married to Amara, a woman so beautiful that people often said she looked like she belonged in a movie. But lately, Chijiok wasn't happy. He had a feeling deep inside him, one he couldn't ignore. One sunny afternoon, he sat in his massive living room, staring at a painting on the wall. The painting showed a lion standing tall and proud, but Chijiok didn't feel like that lion. He felt small and uncertain. The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts. Papa Chijiok called his father, Chief Oben, as he walked into the room. Chief Oben was an older man with a kind face but sharp eyes that always seemed to see right through people. He wore a simple white kaftan and leaned slightly on his walking stick. "Chijiok, my son," Chief Oben said, sitting down next to him, "why do you look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders? Talk to me." Chijiok sighed deeply. "Papa, I've been thinking a lot about Amara. I don't know if she really loves me for who I am or if she loves me because I'm rich." Chief Oben raised an eyebrow. "Why do you think that? Has she done something to make you doubt her?" "No, Papa, it's just a feeling. You know how she treats the staff sometimes? She doesn't shout at them when I'm around, but I've overheard her being rude to the housekeeper once or twice. It got me thinking, what if she's pretending to be nice to me too?" Chief Oben leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully. That's a serious thing to think about, my son. But feelings are not enough. You need to know for sure." Chijiok nodded slowly. "Exactly. But how do I do that? I can't just ask her, 'Do you love me for me or my money?' She'd never admit it, even if it were true." The room was quiet for a moment. Chief Oben tapped his walking stick lightly on the marble floor, a small smile creeping onto his face. "I have an idea," he said. Chijiok looked at him with curiosity. "What is it, Papa? What if we test her?" Chief Oben said, leaning forward. "What if I pretend to be your gateman for a while? I'll live here, do the work, and see how she treats me when she thinks I'm just an old man working for you." Chijiok's eyes widened. "Papa, you want to pretend to be a gateman? But you're a chief. People will think I've lost my mind, letting my own father work as a gateman." Chief Oben chuckled. "Don't worry about what people think. This is about finding out the truth. If Amara is truly kind and respectful, she'll treat me well no matter who I am. But if she's only putting on a show for you, we'll know." Chijiok hesitated. The idea seemed crazy, but at the same time, it made sense. "Papa, are you sure about this? It'll be hard work. And what if she finds out?" "She won't," Chief Oben said confidently. "I'll dress the part. No one will recognize me. And as for hard work, I'm not afraid of that. I've lived through tougher times than you can imagine." Chijiok nodded slowly. "All right, Papa, let's do it. But we need to plan this carefully. If she finds out, it'll ruin everything." Chief Oben smiled. "Don't worry, my son. Leave the details to me." The next day, Chief Oben began his transformation. He went to a small tailor in town and ordered plain clothes, worn-out trousers, a faded shirt, and an old cap. He also bought a pair of dusty sandals that looked like they had seen better days. When he returned home, Chijiok couldn't believe his eyes. "Papa, you look completely different. I wouldn't recognize you if I didn't know it was you." Chief Oben laughed. "Good. That means Amara won't recognize me either." They went over the plan one more time. Chief Oben would arrive at the mansion the next morning, introduced by the house manager as the new gateman. He would live in the small gatehouse at the front of the property, just like any other worker. "Remember," Chief Oben said, "you can't treat me like your father while I'm working as the gateman. Act like I'm just another employee." "I understand, Papa," Chijiok said. "But promise me one thing, if it gets too much for you, we'll stop. I don't want you to suffer." Chief Oben smiled. "You worry too much, my son. I'll be fine." The next morning, everything went according to plan. The house manager introduced Chief Oben to Amara as Paro Oben, the new gateman. Amara barely looked at him, nodding curtly before walking off to the living room. Chief Oben noticed her lack of interest, but didn't let it bother him. He settled into the small gatehouse, a humble room with a bed, a chair, and a tiny table. It was a far cry from the grand rooms he was used to, but he didn't mind. This was all part of the test. As the day went on, Chief Oben began his duties, opening and closing the gate, sweeping the driveway, and keeping watch over the entrance. Amara passed by a few times, but didn't say much. Her silence wasn't rude, but it wasn't warm either. Later that evening, Chijiok checked in with his father. They met in a quiet corner of the mansion, away from prying eyes. "How was your first day, Papa?" Chijiok asked. Chief Oben chuckled. "It was interesting. Amara didn't say much to me today, but I can see she doesn't think much of me. She barely looks at me when she walks by." Chijiok frowned. "Maybe she's just shy around new people. Let's give it a few days." "Of course," Chief Oben said. "This is just the beginning. We'll see how she behaves as time goes on." As the days passed, Chief Oben settled into his role. He made small mistakes on purpose to see how Amara would react, like opening the gate too slowly or forgetting to greet her when she drove in. At first, she ignored the mistakes, but her patience began to wear thin. "Paro," she snapped one afternoon when he didn't open the gate fast enough. "What is wrong with you? Do you think I have all day to sit in this car and wait for you to do your job?" "I'm sorry, madam," Chief Oben said humbly, bowing his head. "You should be," she replied, rolling her eyes before driving off. Chief Oben sighed as he closed the gate behind her. He had expected this, but it still stung to see her treat him this way. That evening, he met Chijiok again to report what had happened. "She's starting to show her true colors," Chief Oben said. "She shouted at me today over something small. I stayed calm, but it's clear she doesn't respect me." Chijiok's heart sank. "Papa, I don't know what to say. I hoped she would treat you better." "We'll see how far this goes," Chief Oben said. "But remember, my son, the truth is better than living in doubt. Whatever we find out, you'll know where you stand." Chijiok nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude. He didn't like what he was hearing, but he was glad his father was helping him uncover the truth. She didn't look at him again as she walked toward the house, her heels clicking loudly on the pavement. He sighed and closed the gate behind her. That evening, Chijiok called his father to check on him. They spoke in hushed voices in the small gatehouse to avoid being overheard. "How did today go, Papa?" Chijiok asked, sitting on the edge of the small bed. Oin sighed. "Your wife is something else. She shouted at me twice today over little things. She doesn't even look at me like I'm a person, just someone here to serve her." Chijiok frowned. "I was hoping she'd treat you better. Maybe she's just stressed." "Stressed or not, it doesn't excuse treating people badly," Oin said firmly. "If this is how she acts around someone she thinks is just a gateman, imagine how she treats others when no one is watching." Chijiok leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "Papa, I don't know what to say. I love Amara, but this isn't what I expected." "That's why we're doing this, my son," Oin said gently. "We need to know the truth. We're only just getting started." The next few days followed a similar pattern. Amara's impatience grew with each passing day. Oin made small mistakes here and there, taking an extra second to open the gate, forgetting to sweep a corner of the driveway, and each time, Amara's reaction was the same. "Oin, are you serious right now?" she snapped one afternoon when he was a bit late opening the gate. "Do you think this is a joke? If you can't do this simple job, maybe I should find someone who can." "I'm sorry, madam," he said humbly, keeping his eyes on the ground. "You're always sorry," she muttered, shaking her head as she drove in. One evening after dinner, Amara was in the living room scrolling through her phone when the housekeeper approached her. "Madam, the gateman said he needs new cleaning supplies," the housekeeper said softly. Amara looked up, irritated. "And why is he telling you to tell me? Can't he come and speak to me himself?" "I think he's afraid of disturbing you, madam," the housekeeper replied. Amara sighed loudly. "Afraid of disturbing me? He disturbs me every day with his incompetence." "Fine, get him what he needs, but tell him this is the last time I want to hear about cleaning supplies." "Yes, madam," the housekeeper said quickly, leaving the room. The next day, Amara called out to Oin as she walked to her car. "Oin, come here." Yes, madam, he said, hurrying toward her. I need you to wash my car, it's filthy, and I can't be seen driving it like this, she said, pointing at a tiny smudge on the side of the car. Yes, madam, I'll do it right away, he said. And make sure you do a good job, she added. If I see even one spot, you'll have to do it again. Yes, madam, he replied. Owen worked on the car for nearly an hour, scrubbing every inch of it until it gleamed. When Amara came to inspect it, she found a tiny speck of dirt near the tires. Look at this, she said, pointing at the spot. Do you call this clean? I'm sorry, madam. I must have missed it, he said. Missed it, she repeated, her voice rising. I told you to do a good job, and this is what you give me? Clean it again. Yes, madam, he said quietly, picking up the cloth to start over. That night, Chijioke visited his father again. The gatehouse felt smaller than usual as they sat in silence for a moment. Papa, how was today? Chijioke finally asked. Owen shook his head. Your wife shouted at me over a tiny speck of dirt on her car. She made me clean it twice. Chijioke sighed. Maybe she doesn't mean to be this way. Maybe she's just under pressure. Owen gave him a long, steady look. Stress doesn't give anyone the right to treat others badly. Think about it, Chijioke. If this is how she treats an old man she barely knows, how do you think she truly feels about those around her? Chijioke didn't reply immediately. He stared at the small wooden table in the corner of the room, his mind racing. Let's give it more time, he said finally, his voice quiet. Maybe she'll prove us wrong. Maybe, Owen said, though his tone carried little hope. Those flowers with care, making sure they looked their best, yet here she was dismissing his efforts as though they meant nothing. That night, Chijioke found his father sitting outside the gatehouse, looking up at the stars. Papa, Chijioke said softly, sitting beside him, you look troubled. I am, my son, Pero Binner admitted. Today, your wife spoke about me as if I were a child who couldn't think for himself. She doesn't respect anyone who isn't on her level. Chio, I'm starting to wonder if she even knows how to. Chio sighed deeply. I don't know what to do, Papa. I want to believe she's a good person, but everything you're telling me. Sometimes the truth isn't easy to hear, Pero Binner said gently, but it's better than living a lie. We'll keep going, my son. Let's see if there's any kindness in her heart, even if it's hidden. Chijioke nodded, though his heart felt heavy. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer anymore. And so the days went on, each one revealing more cracks in the perfect image Amara had built around herself. Pero Binner remained patient, watching and waiting, determined to uncover the truth for his son's sake. The sun was already high in the sky when Amara walked out of the house, her sunglasses perched on her nose and her phone glued to her ear. She was speaking loudly, her tone sharp and full of frustration. I don't understand why they can't deliver it on time, she said, pacing near the driveway. Is it that hard to follow instructions? Pero Binner stood near the gate quietly sweeping. He listened, but kept his eyes on the ground. He had learned to remain invisible when Amara was in one of her moods. She ended the call abruptly and turned to him. Pero. Yes, madam, he replied, straightening up. Have you watered the roses this morning? She asked. I did, madam, he said, his voice calm. She walked over to the flower beds, bending slightly to inspect them. It doesn't look like you did. Look at these leaves, they're dry. I'm sorry, madam, he said. I'll water them again right away. You better, she snapped, standing upright. I don't want to repeat myself every day. If you can't handle the simple tasks, maybe I should find someone who can. Pero Binner nodded quietly and went to fetch the watering can. As he watered the roses again, he couldn't help but think about how easily she dismissed people. Her tone, her words, they all carried an air of superiority, as if everyone else was beneath her. Chioke rubbed his forehead. A pained expression crossed his face. Papa, I don't understand. She's not like this with me. She's always kind, always cheerful. How can she be so different with you? That's the mask she wears, Chijioke, Pero said gently. But masks don't last forever. You're seeing her true face now. You asked for the truth, and here it is. Cheok sank onto a nearby bench, his head in his hands. What do I do, Papa? I can't just walk away from her. I love her. But how can I stay with someone who treats people this way? Pero sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. You need to decide what kind of life you want, my son. Love is important, yes, but so is respect. Without it, love cannot stand. Let's keep going for now. Watch her yourself, see what I see. Cheok nodded reluctantly. All right, Papa. But I'll pretend to leave for another trip. That way, I can observe her without her knowing. Pero gave a small smile. A wise decision. The truth will show itself, Cheok. It always does. That evening, Cheok packed a small bag and informed Amaka that he had to leave for another business trip. She didn't question him, only reminding him to transfer money into her account while he was away. Don't forget, Cheok, she said, her tone more demanding than loving. There are some things I need to buy, and I don't want to run out of money while you're gone. I'll send it, he replied, his voice flat.